Hello and welcome to another bit of Batty Science. Recently I've been watching quite a few people discussing ideas for how to plant the best, most efficient farm. The farm that will give you the most crops in the shortest time. In particular, many of these people are talking about their first farm, the starter farm that you build in the first or second Minecraft day. It'll be a wheat farm started from seeds you've gathered from grasses. This is likely to be your main source of food apart from the occasional apple, so it needs to be up and producing enough wheat to make you a loaf or two before you starve. The game mechanics that apply to farming are all well documented in the wiki, but I would have to confess that I have read that page more than once and have never picked up on some of the important points until Cherrybit has explained a few of these to me, and that sent me back there for a really careful read. It's worth running through the basics of getting seeds to grow into harvestable wheat. Seeds must be planted in farmland, or dirt that has been tilled with a hoe. Wheat starts at growth stage 0 and has to get through 6 intermediate growth stages before arriving fully grown at stage 7 when it can be harvested. Growth takes place somewhat randomly, so you can't say for certain when any one plant will grow to the next stage, but you can estimate how many of a large number of plants should grow within a certain time. The first thing to note is that growth only takes place in a light level of 9 or above, so unless you light up your farm you will get no growth at all at night. The next thing is that crops grow much faster on hydrated soil, so you need water nearby. The water needs to be within 4 blocks horizontally, including diagonally, and must be at the same Y level as the farmland block, or 1 level above. It's worth noting that there is no benefit in making an area extra bright or extra hydrated. Once the light level is at 9, that's the best it can be, and once the farmland block is wet, that's the best it can be. Those are the rules that nearly everybody knows. The next ones are a little bit less widely known. Crops grow best when they have 7 or 8 blocks of farmland immediately beside the block they're planted in. The lower the number of farmland blocks next door, the slower your plant will grow. So, wheat planted along the edge of a river will all be slowed down by having 3 water blocks alongside them, which means that even if all of the other surrounding blocks are tilled farmland, that can only be a maximum of 5, and that isn't quite good enough. Also note that if you don't hoe all of the blocks alongside where your wheat is growing, then all of those plants will grow slowly because they have ordinary grass or dirt blocks beside them and not farmland. The most subtle rule has actually been quite widely discussed recently. This is the rule that says that if a plant has the same kind of plant growing beside it, then it gets a growth penalty, which slows it down quite significantly. However, it's not as bad as it sounds, because if the similar plants are alongside it in one direction only, north-south or east-west, then it is let off of this penalty. The upshot of this rule is that it's best to plant your crops in straight rows and have empty farmland or a different crop in between the rows. So, how best to plant your farm? If we look at the typical village farm, we can see that it falls down on several of these rules. It is not lit up, not very much anyway, so the crops will only grow in the daytime. All of the crops growing beside the water do not have enough farmland next to them, and the same is true of all of the crops growing down the outside. Finally, if this is a wheat-only farm, then all of the plants will receive the growth penalty for having similar crops beside them in 2 directions. Not a very good job, Mr. Villager. So, I've arranged a test and have built a few different types of farm, so we can leave them to grow for 40 minutes and see how much we can harvest from each of them. The first is very similar to the village farm and suffers from all of the same problems. The next is the same farm but lit up so that it should continue to grow at night. Over here we have a farm similar to the one many players would plant early in a game. It is an improvement on the village farm in that it is using 2 separated rows of wheat. However, it has some problems being built along the river's edge, and because this far row lacks a row of farmland beside it. Here is a farm which should produce maximum growth as fast as possible. Notice how I've kept the water to a minimum, have lit the area up, and have made sure that there is farmland not only in between the growing rows but also around the edges. I built another smaller version of it with only the one water source. It should be just as efficient, but it will not produce as much yield since you can only sow 2/3 of the number of seeds here. I've started the timer and I'm planting all of the seeds. Of course, the last farms will not get started until a couple of minutes after the first, but I hope to correct this at the end of the trial by harvesting each farm in the same order that I sowed them. We are now at the 20-minute mark, halfway through the trial, so let's have a quick look at how the farms are getting on. There's nothing for us at the old-style village farm. We'd be pretty hungry by now. The lit-up version has a plant or two fully grown, but maybe not enough for a loaf yet. The hopefully efficient farm is about halfway there. You should be able to make a few loaves from that already. And I'd have to say that the Riverside farm is also doing quite nicely. You would be able to eat after just 20 minutes. The small version of the efficient farm is doing as well as the larger version, as you might imagine. Okay, the time is up, and after 2 whole Minecraft days I'm going to harvest all of the farms and put the results into the chest that's beside each farm. As you can see, the standard village farm has done really badly. Hardly anything to harvest from here after 40 minutes. In fact, it's just 1 wheat, not enough for a loaf. You would be very likely to starve. The next farm has clearly done a lot better. Just having some lights to double the growing time has meant quite a big difference, and I'm harvesting some wheat from here. And the rain starts. But I got 15 wheat from here, so I would survive. For over 50 seeds planted, it can't be called a great result though. Thunderstorm even. The gods are angry evidently. The big farm next, and it looks pretty much fully grown, just the occasional one that hasn't grown to full ripeness in 40 minutes. Maybe just one. 53 wheat. That's enough for 17, nearly 18 loaves, so you could keep your whole family alive on that. The Riverside farm, planted in separate rows, looks to have done very nicely too, though maybe not quite as well as the big square farm. It would certainly keep you very much alive. 40 wheat, so that's about 3/4 of the amount of wheat of the most efficient farm. And the last farm, the smaller version of the one which produced over 50. Well, we can't hope for 50 since we only planted 28 seeds. And in fact I can see a few that aren't full grown yet. It's mostly full grown. Interesting that these corner blocks are not finished yet. Well, 24 from 28 seeds, that's about 80% fully grown. In between the Riverside farm and the big efficient farm in value, this one. Okay, to sum up, provide just enough water and light, plant your crops in rows and separate and surround these rows with tilled farmland. You can get by with forgetting some of these rules, but for the best possible output, keep all of them. And I know that a water bucket is necessary to make the best types of farm, with just a dot of water here and there. And you can't make a bucket without iron. I guess it just means, if you're intent on building a really efficient farm, that your first iron should go into making a bucket. In practice, I guess you can build your very first farm close to the water's edge and then extend it as soon as you can. I hope you found this interesting and a little bit enlightening. I've been BatHeart. Thank you very much for watching.